Hi everybody, welcome along to another free author event with Braille House and Bookshop 507. Today we are joined by the wonderfully talented Barbara Hannay. Welcome.
Thank you, Andrew. Lovely to be here.
A pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. So you've written more than 50 novels, you've won numerous awards. What started it all?
Well, I actually probably started before I even knew how to write. I started telling my stories to my sisters. I'd draw pictures and I'd pass pieces of paper through the slats of orange boxes, and this was movies that they had to watch.
Oh, wow, nice.
I obviously was just wired that way. When I joined the Brownies when I was about 8 years old, the first thing I wanted to do was the writer's badge. So
nice.
I just always loved writing and scribbling, and I became an English teacher rather than staying at uni and I never thought of myself as an author though.
Yeah.
Became an English teacher, but it was while I was teaching a unit of popular fiction to my year 11 kids that we had to look at the romance genre. And it took me right back to the books I'd loved as a child, Anne of Green Gables and Little Women and all those stories. And they all had a thread of romance in them. And I don't know, I just started thinking, it just reminded me how much I loved them, and I'd been looking for something to write. And so in the next Christmas holidays, I thought, I'm going to have a go at this. And
nice.
that book got rejected, but I'd been bitten by the bug. I had to keep trying after.
You won't take no for an answer.
No.
Very good. So you've got so many books. So to read your books, sorry, you've got so many. Where do you recommend people start? Is it at the beginning or?
No, I don't think that's necessary. All my books stand alone. I've written some with connected characters, but even those you don't need to read in any particular order. Nearly all of them are set in Queensland.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it depends on whether you want to read a short, quick sort of romance. I've written for Mills and Boon,
mm-hmm.
and they're what they call sweet romances rather than the raunchy ones. But they concentrate on just one couple, whereas my longer books that I've written for Penguin have a lot more characters, and they often have intersecting timelines and things like that. So I guess it depends on what sort of story you'd prefer. But I think all my stories, my voice stays the same, and I put as much effort into them all. So I don't really have a recommended place to start.
Just get a pile of them and pick whichever one. Nice. And romance can be quite a hard genre to write. Where do you get your inspiration from?
Good question. I actually think it came originally from those books I loved as a girl. You know, as I said, you know, I grew up in a family of all girls. I had all girl cousins. My mum had only sisters. So I had a very feminine childhood. So all the books and movies I saw were focused more on the sorts of things that girls like. So I think I'd been surrounded by it. So although I had to learn still quite a lot about what makes a romance novel work,
mm-hmm.
I think I had the background that sort of steered me in that direction. Yeah, lots of people say, why don't you write crime or detective fiction or something else? But this was where I came from. Yeah. The inspiration, really, it's more about finding interesting characters and people with problems, and the romance isn't the easier part of it than that, really.
Yeah, right. And as a writer, what advice would you give to a younger Barbara?
Yeah, I saw you that question that you'd prepared for me, and I thought, gee, that's a really good question. Would I have done anything differently? Maybe I could have started earlier, but as it is, my first book wasn't published till I was 48. And I actually think I'm quite happy with the way things went. That I raised my family first, and I spent all those years teaching, and then I moved on to a different sort of thing in later career. So just yeah, on your barb, keep reading and
Yeah.
stick with it.
Yeah, no. Keep going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you've had some fantastic success with your books. Obviously, they're selling well and numerous awards. What surprised you the most?
I think the thing that surprised me the most is that I haven't got sick of it. You know, I've been writing professionally for over 20 years now, and I still sit down at my desk every day, and I really enjoy what I'm doing. And I thought I might have been over it by now. So the fact that I love it, I feel very lucky. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. And like your writing style makes the reader feel like they really know the characters, and this gets them really involved. Is that talent hard to master, or does it come easy to you? Or
Um, I think what I've learned is about giving plenty of detail. One thing is making sure that the reader sympathises with the character in some way, so that they care about them, whether they've had something bad happen to them and they're soldiering on in spite of it, or whether they show kindness to someone else, or however you get the reader on side with the character. Um, but putting in lots of detail so that the world they live in feels real. I think that's an important thing that I've learned,
yeah,
and that I appreciate in books I read. Yeah.
yeah. Right. Well, just on that, the countryside in your books are amazing, set in amazing places. Do places inspire you?
Yeah, I love. Yeah, sense of place has always been important. Excuse me. And in fact, the very first book that I had accepted was set out at on the Burdekin River out near Charters Towers, out the back of Townsville. And I had tried setting books before that in exotic places like Hong Kong or on a tropical island or something, and they'd been rejected. And they weren't rejected because of the setting. There were still things I was learning about how to put a novel together. But once I said it, because our family used to go camping on the Burdekin all the time as our kids were growing up, and canoeing, and we just loved the country there. And we had a friend who owned a cattle property there with a beautiful big homestead, and we used to visit him a lot. So when I started writing about a place that I really loved, and in that world that inspired me, that's when my story really took off. So ever since, a sense of place has been a very important part of my books. Yeah.
Yeah.
We lived on the Atherton Tablelands until only recently. We spent about 15 years up there, and I loved setting books up there as well.
Yeah,
So
beautiful country up there.
yeah.
And does it get easier the more books you write? To write more, do you think?
No, unfortunately not. No, it's like having babies. None of them they all have their own way of emerging, and
And none of them arrive easily.
no. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, some are a little bit easier than others, but you can have a book that falls together fairly easily, and then the next one can be a problem again. So
Yeah.
no, it doesn't get any easier. I can tell you that from quite a few of my writer mates as well. It's something we're all finding. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And you've actually very generous with you've got lots of writing tips on your website for budding authors. Why do you think it's important to share knowledge and your talent in that way?
Well, it possibly comes because I was a high school teacher for many years, and I just love teaching and sharing ideas. But also that whole idea of giving back. When you feel that you've been lucky to get a career that you want, and there's only so much that you can pass on, though, and the rest has to come from the writer slogging away themselves and working it out for themselves. But yeah, I guess the teacher in me is always keen. I've got another workshop coming up in Townsville here in a few weeks that I'm looking forward to.
Excellent. How do people get involved with those? How can they find the workshops that you do? Via your website?
It will be, yes, or it'll probably go on Facebook as well, yeah.
Oh, yeah, nice. And how about yourself? What sort of books do you read for you?
Yeah, I read quite a variety. I sometimes quite enjoy non-fiction, autobiographies, or history, or self-help even. But with fiction, I suppose I mainly read what I would call women's fiction, you know, books geared towards women with a dash of romance, although I quite like crime as well, and history, historical fiction, yeah.
Yeah. And what advice would you give to a first-time author?
You mean someone who's setting out to try to write a book?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first, I think it's really important to write the kind of books you love, not necessarily ones that you think are going to be selling or that other people seem to want to read. You've got to really love the storylines, and read widely in the genre so that you know what it is that the readers of that kind of genre expect, and why that, and try to work out what it is they love about it. That's what I had to learn with romance. I told you how I started off after doing that unit at school, and I thought I had it cracked and then I'd be able to sit down and just whip one out and they'd be so grateful. I had to read hundreds of those stories, you know, over the next few years to really, really absorb what it was about those stories that millions of readers love to read. So, yeah. And the other thing is that if you want to be published in what we call the traditional publisher, where you send it off and get it accepted by a publisher, don't give up at first rejection. I have had so many friends who have given up after a rejection, and I just feel sorry for them. I know rejections hurt, but it's part of the learning process, and be prepared to keep going for a while. Yeah.
And do you get feedback, or do they just say no?
Usually, you do get some feedback. Yeah, just depends how. Yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of advice, what's the best advice that you were given?
I think the best advice I've read, and it came from a New York agent, Donald Mars, who came out to a conference here in Australia, and he talked about having tension on every page. He said, you wouldn't expect that maybe in a romance story, but in any kind of story, that's what keeps the readers. So it's emotional tension, or it's not necessarily thriller type levels of tension, but just to keep that story tense and keep the reader on edge and, you know, involved and all the way through. Nice. No sort of quiet cups of teas where nothing's actually happening.
For a couple of pages. So what's next for you? What books have you got coming up?
The next book comes out next month, actually, on the 4th of August, and it's called The Sister's Gift. And it's set, I live here in Townsville now, and it's set on Magnetic Island, which is just offshore.
Yeah.
And it's a story about a woman who, in midlife, has lost everything. Her house, her husband has left her, divorced her. She's lost her job, her home, and her marriage within a short period of time, and she has to start over again. And she reconnects with her family that she has been sort of distanced from, but there's a complication in that when she was very young, she had a surrogate baby for her sister, and instead of that, you know, causing a closer bond between them, it actually ended up causing a bit of a rift. So that's part of the emotional problems.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Wow. And are you able to read us a little bit?
Yeah, I can. I thought I could read from the prologue.
Oh, great. Story. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. Okay. On the morning Freya went in, I don't have the book yet. I'm still reading off the manuscript.
It's a little
On the
sneak
morning,
peek for us.
it is a sneak peek, yeah. On the morning Freya went into labour, she told no one. She simply walked onto the magnetic island ferry, found a padded seat near an open window, and focused on the seagulls lined up along the jetty. While the birds dived for fish and among shell-encrusted pylons, Freya took a deep, steadying breath, just as she'd practiced at the antenatal classes. We can do this, butterfly. Fortunately, the ferry wasn't crowded, but it rocked as it left the island's sheltered bay and headed across open water to Townsville. The jerky movement brought a wave of nausea, accompanied by a fiercer and longer contraction. Fighting back the urge to whimper, Freya closed her eyes and breathed even more deeply as she gently massaged her enormous belly. Her solo journey had never been part of the official plan, but more a last-minute impulse. After 9 long, often trying months, the baby girl was about to arrive, and Freya had been gripped by an unexpected need to experience the momentous event on her own. Selfish? Perhaps, but there were limits to her generosity. Just the same, she'd never expected the labour to progress so quickly. First babies were supposed to be drawn out affairs, weren't they? As the island's boulder and pine-studded headlands receded, another contraction came, closer and stronger than the last. The 20-minute ferry ride seemed to take forever, and when the boat finally reached the dock in Ross Creek, the young fellow in charge of tying up the pier was tediously slow. Tourists jostled on the wharf, impatient to hurry on board for a day on an idyllic tropical island. Freya swayed unsteadily as she stood, felt dampness down below, and had a flash of panic. Not now. Hang on, butterfly. Please don't rush. Praying that her waters would remain intact until she reached the hospital, Freya made her way down the ramp, moving slowly, cautiously, for the first time in her life hanging onto the railing like a little old lady. And as another contraction arrived, the decision to take a taxi to the hospital was a no-brainer. She couldn't possibly drive the little rattle-trap Honda she kept in the ferry's car park for use on the mainland. A mere 3 hours later, Freya made the necessary phone call. Pearl, she's here. What? Who's there? The baby, she's arrived. Oh my God, how? She's so cute. I think she looks a lot like Troy. Freya! Pearl's voice was frantic. Why didn't you tell me? You knew I wanted to be there. Troy's on night shift this week. He could have come too. We both wanted to be there. You knew that. Sorry. Freya looked down at the bundle of miniature perfection in her arms, reliving the enormous sense of achievement and excitement that had overridden the pain when this little girl slipped sweetly into the world with only a minimum of assistance from the midwife. It was all a bit of a rush. But we had everything planned. We told you so many times we wanted to be there for the birth. Pearl's voice was sorrowful, accusing. Almost certainly she was crying, but Freya refused to feel guilty. She's here safely, Pearl. That's the main thing. I suppose. Her sister's voice squeaked then, sounding more like her usual bossy self. Have you expressed colostrum? Not yet, but I will. It's very important, as you know. Freya could imagine Pearl's stern frown now, the earnest expression in her pale blue eyes that could make her look years older than she was. Troy and I'll be on the next ferry. Lovely. You won't actually breastfeed, though, will you? No, Pearl. I'll stick to our agreement. Right. Yes. Good. Less certainly. Of course you will. I promise, Pearl. After a beat. She's yours. Well, yes, of course she is. Freya let out her breath slowly. She hadn't wanted to make trouble today. True, she hadn't obeyed the rules they'd set out, but she was sure she'd earned this treasured window of time alone with the small creature she'd carried for so many months. She looked down at the baby's sweet pink perfection. The skin was so soft, her tiny, tiny fingers and diminutive ears so exquisitely faultless. The baby screwed up her face, and love swelled in Freya to the point of bursting. It's over to you now, Pearl, she said bravely. To you and Troy. Thank you. There was no mistaking the relief in her sister's voice.
Wow. That's amazing. I'm in.
Thank you.
No, fantastic. And where can people buy your books?
Well, this book should be in all the department stores and yeah, Woolies and places like that. And I think, well, obviously most of them are available as ebooks online if people like ebook.
Yep.
The Mills and Boon also come. I don't know if any of your readers can read large print, can they, or they no?
Some can read large print. Yeah, we also have the bookshop, which is all print books, and it's print books for sale, funding library books in Braille. But audio books for sure.
Yeah, they're coming out. It'll be out as an audio book too. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. And thank you so much for joining us today. We feel so honoured to have you.
Oh, no, you're not.
Do you have any
but anyhow, thank you.
Yeah, do you have any parting words or messages for people that are watching this?
Oh, just it's lovely to be able to talk to people who love books, whether, however, whatever form they come in. And I met someone the other day who doesn't like anything that's not fact, and I just feel so sorry for them because I think stories are so important for all of us. So great to be here sharing a little window into my world with other fellow readers.
Nice. Well, thank you again so much from all of us at Braille House and Bookshop 507. We wish you all the best. Not that you need luck, we just wish you all the best. And we all look forward to reading some more amazing stories.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Great to be here.
Have a good day.
Good. Bye.
Bye.